So that's the sound of paint being put on a boat. How long is the job today going to take for this paint job?
That's an interesting point. The short answer is longer than it should have done. I'm doing it for the client, and she requested that it was just that I just do a very quick job.
So this is not your boat, but
No.
this is your job?
Yeah, but I live on a boat as well. I'm a boater who works for other boaters doing boat work of various types.
And in terms of boats along this canal and along the other canals of East London, they're in all sorts of different shapes of repair, different kinds of repair. Some are very well kept, some are raggedy, some are obviously works in process. It seems that people like different kinds of styles, almost in a way that it reflects their style of living.
Yeah, they've got very much different characters. Some people go for very new build boats that all the mod cons, and then you've got something like this, which is an old classic, traditional Friesland Dutch barge hull, converted to a liverboard, which, being of a certain age, is very much a labour of love.
So is it steel?
It is indeed steel, yeah.
So it's solid. It's not gonna. I mean, it's come across the channel.
I don't know if it came across by sea or if it was shipped over, but it was surveyed out of the water last year, and yes, it is solid.
Got you. And the work that you do for different boaters, is it anything and everything? How does it work?
Within reason, yeah. I mean, I left school unusually early. I'm not actually qualified in anything, but I've been a boater on and off for 20 years. Consider myself a bargee traveller, and being a man who doesn't like to pay a person who can, it means that I've picked up various skills over the years and turned it into my living.
So it's something you could have slowly picked up along the way, become a master of all trades.
I wouldn't say a master, a jack.
A jack of all trades.
And a master
Master
of
of some.
is often more useful than a master of none, of one.
When did you first start on boats yourself? Can you remember your first boat?
Oh, absolutely, very vividly. So I was in my early 20s. I just moved back to the UK from having lived in Ireland, and I was living in a squat in Norwich. In what I mean you could relate to as the traditional bohemian quarter of the city. Norwich being the furthest inland port in the country. The difference between a port and a dock being that a port is tidal. Hasn't been a functioning port for years, and at the time it was very derelict, and I'd been thrown out of the squat I was living in, and there was a small community of bargee travellers and boaters living in the city centre who had a small concrete cruiser in their custody, and saw the situation I was in and invited me to live on it to look after it.
Concrete for a boat doesn't sound usual. Is it unusual to have a concrete boat?
They still get manufactured. It was a big fad in the 70s. They call it, it's ferrous cement. So you've got a rebar structure coated with as an epoxide cement so that it's waterproof.
But it doesn't make it more brittle? I mean, I'm just imagining if it knocks into the side of a...
But unlike a steel boat where, with a steel boat it degrades over time due to various types of corrosion, like electrolysis being a big one on the river here, caused by people's domestic electric supplies. Whereas with the problem with a ferrous hull is they very much have a finite lifespan. So they generally last for 20 or 30 years, and they're not something that you can maintain and repair beyond a certain time.
And so when you got your first boat up there in Norwich, in the flatlands, having been in a squat, did you then invite friends on to be with you, or did you enjoy the solitude of having your own space?
A bit of both, actually. A bit of both. I then went on to purchase my first boat shortly after that, which was a giant 70s plywood broad cruiser. Didn't really know what I was doing at the time. It was in a very dilapidated state, and a little bit of both, solitude and sociability in equal measure, I would say.
You've mentioned two things about the beginning of your life. One is that you were in Ireland, and the other one is that you left school early.
Yeah.
Living in London makes Ireland seem like quite a romantic alternative possibility. There's less rush around life. What was it that made you come this side? What was it that attracted you to come over this side?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I mean, that's a very difficult one to answer. Various factors. Like at the time, Ireland, Ireland's still to this day does not have enough work for its population. Ever since it gained its independence and liberation from the British Empire and the colonial state, there's always been a tradition of people having to leave as economic migrants to find work. That's one of my main motives.
So it was a practical need. Is like there's more work over this side.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's no comparison. I mean, there was a boom in Ireland in the sort of like the mid-noughties, where like economically, I mean, the Ireland today and the Ireland I lived in at the time are two completely different worlds.
You came over this side. Between where we are now with you painting this boat and when you first came over, have you lived many different kinds of life? Have you lived one kind of life?
No. I mean, all in all, I've lived a boating lifestyle in total for 20 years. I mean, 8 of those years were on the Norfolk Broads, the rest here in London. But I mean, I've squatted in London quite a lot. Squatted and lived with the squat community for about 15 years as well. When I was a kid, my dad lived in a teepee, which was quite interesting.
That's different and fun. Was this when you were a kid?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
That must have been magical.
I mean, I'm from a camp. Well, don't know about magical. It's certainly being a working class boy from a council estate. It's certainly opened my eyes to there being different ways to live.
So the teepee wasn't in the council estate?
No, it wasn't. It was on the side of a hill in the Cotswolds, and I to this day still don't think that any self-respecting First Nations and Native American would live in a large hide cone with a hole in the roof in the middle of winter on a hill in the Cotswolds.
So you're saying it's not something for all weathers here?
I'm saying that it's something. Being a kid from a council house and a council estate at the time. I mean, I was about 6 or 7 years old. I found very eye-opening, but quite traumatic at the same time.
Oh, right. When you're living in a tent and you're going to school and your mates are coming back, they must have enjoyed the life that you lived.
Who? Sorry.
Your friends, like other people who are kind of in the area.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, the contrast between, I mean, it was the scene that my dad moved on to when he left my mum and moved into a teepee was a very well-to-do bohemian middle-class scene. And I mean, I went to a council estate infant primary school, whereas a lot of the kids I'd hang out with in the teepee at the weekend were Steiner educated.
That's an interesting mix.
So a completely different world.
That's an interesting mix. Did you like that mix? Did you like the sort of the variety at that age?
Yes and no. I mean, I liked the freedom of being like free range in the countryside at the weekend. I miss my bowl of cereal in front of Saturday morning television. That's for sure.
So, from that beginning, I suppose, in a way, from an early age, it gives you a life without as many borders as some people have, maybe slightly less boundaries in terms of how you see the world?
Yes and no, and being someone who's kind of partially grew up in an alternative culture and what I would term an experimental culture, I think it has its pros and its cons. But for me personally, I think it's had more benefit than it has any negative effects, definitely.
And when you mentioned that the squatting scene that you were also involved in here in London, I remember 20 years ago here in East London, a street that I lived in about half a mile south of here, there were 5 squats. And when I left there were no squats. It's been reduced and reduced over the years for various different reasons. Is that what you've also seen as someone who's been in the squatting scene? Have you seen it shrink?
Oh, absolutely. Well, one of my main motives for moving back into a riverine lifestyle was the criminalisation of residential squatting. Made it very, very difficult to squat in London.
Explain what that is for people who are unfamiliar with the whole squatting scene.
So like squatting up until the late 2000s was a civil offence, both to squat in a residential and a commercial premises. During the reign of David Cameron and the Condem government, residential squatting got criminalised. Therefore, the vast majority of people up until that point, a larger percentage, I would say, lived in residential squats. So it meant that, and as well at the time, London was still a lot of areas that are now gentrified were still being gentrified. There was still a lot of industrial space for people to live in commercial premises.
So like empty premises?
They're becoming less and less, especially in this area, as those commercial businesses, due to higher rates and development and gentrification in the area, are getting pushed out.
And as that's happened, as you've been part of the scene, how have people who've squatted reacted to this? Have they given up and joined mainstream society in how they live, or have they found different ways to live alternately?
A bit of both, I think. I think a lot of the people I used to squat with. I mean, as well, I used to live. There's a lot of crossover between the sort of squatter community and the new traveller community. And with ULEZ coming in, a lot of my friends, as well as being squatters, lived in living vehicles. So with the introduction of ULEZ, that became more and more difficult. So that's
the control system for cars of a certain age or with certain kinds of engines.
It's emission zone charging.
Yeah, it charges you for having certain types of vehicles. So if you live in a van, then it's a problem.
It's a lot harder. You need to live in a very modern van. And the whole idea of being a van dweller is it's a cheaper lifestyle with less outgoing. So a lot of my friends of my generation, they've either got kids and settled down into a more sedentary, for want of a better word, normal lifestyle, or just migrated to other places in the country where that kind of lifestyle's still a lot easier.
Now we happen to be in a part of East London which is quite gentrified. The price of houses is going up, but also the number of boats on the canal is increasing. But you've got a different kind of boating community probably than you used to have like a decade ago. You've got a younger maybe, and maybe people who actually got more money who live on boats. Would that be true?
I think to an extent. I think I think a decade or so ago there was a certain demographic of boaters, younger, middle class kids coming of age, were in a position where their family parents could help them out with a deposit on a mortgage. Might have got a one-bedroom flat in the area. That's now completely out of reach for most normal people, due to the ridiculous price of housing and how unattainable a deposit on a mortgage is. And I think so a lot of younger people of that demographic, that money that would have gone into a deposit and a mortgage has gone into getting a livable boat. So the density of boaters has definitely changed, and I think to a certain extent that's changed the demographic as well. That said, one of the things that I really appreciate about the boating community is the diversity. The fact that you can have say a doctor or a teacher living on a boat one side of you, and you can have an artist or a student living the other, and I like that. I like that diversity. It's not like, whereas with I found the sort of alternative culture to be quite monotone in a lot of ways, whereas boating is generally diverse. I think that's one of the good things about it.
And also you use the word boating community. Is it community? Do people help each other? Generally, if you're on a boat, if someone else is on a boat, they're part of your scene?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think it's a difficult thing to generalise about. I mean, there are groups of people who move around with each other. There are groups of people who choose to moor with each other when they come across each other. I think there are different scenes, different cliques. But then there's you've got other aspects whereas like one of the big differences of living on the canal or the river to living in a house is like if I fall in a river, it doesn't matter who my neighbour is. They're out there and they're getting you out, And so there's that aspect of people having to watch out for each other and look out and watch each other's backs. That I think, especially a good example of how normal sedentary life in this area used to be. I think that's an aspect of lifestyle and culture that as the East End got gentrified and people moved out post-war into the new towns, etc., and the general makeup changed, that it lost.
What's your name? I don't know your name.
Claus.
Klaus.
Yeah.
I'm Dave.
Hi,
Klaus.
Dave.
Given what you've told me so far, Klaus, about the life that you've led, it sounds like you're always quite happy to be slightly outside the mainstream. But does that mean that you have a strong kind of political view about how people should live, or are you quite kind of laissez-faire, people should live however they wish to live?
Yeah, I'm definitely a liberal. Yeah, I think that there should be freedom of choice of lifestyle in this country is something that's always been very political. Like going back in time to as far back as the Romany community being expelled under Edward II, up to the way the New Traveller community were disbanded and legislated against in the 80s and the 90s with the Criminal Justice Act and the Public Order Bill, and yeah, I think that they're definitely marginalised. Yeah.
And do you think that kind of tension between those who are living slightly off-centre, slightly alternatively, will always be there? I mean, sometimes it goes in vogue, sometimes it goes out of vogue. What have you seen in your lifetime?
Well, I mean, on that, I mean, you've got that. One of the big negative aspects of gentrification is like, so people will these are canal side properties, and because they have a view on the canal, then they're more desirable, they're more expensive. And yet, so people will move into the area on that basis, and then, we'll start creating some. Not everybody. I mean, a lot of canal side residents are amazing and great, but then a lot, will take on, for want of a better term, an NIMBYistic attitude of. Like,
not in my backyard.
Yeah, things like there are people I've seen people put signs up on the canal, trying to look official, that obviously written by residents complaining about smoke from people's chimneys, for instance. Whereas it's like they're paying. In a way, I mean, I've seen my boat in promotional material for housing developments.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Quite a few friends of mine have.
It's interesting.
Like, this is it. Well, it is.
So you're like the picturesque
I don't think that's just a boating phenomenon. I mean, one of the things that's always interested me in London is, that thing of like you can be walking through quite a rundown, like gritty council estate, and walk round the corner, and it's £1 million houses with Georgian facades. However, the irony is, the people in the house with the Georgian facade are paying to look at the council estate. Whereas the people who live on the council estate are renting and paying to look at the beautiful Georgian facade. So I think that juxtaposition is something that's always played out in London. Of being able to literally walk around a corner from quite sort of like poor and run down to quite rich and affluent. And I think that to a point, I think that can translate from river or canal side residents to boating people. But on the whole, I mean, these instances are rare. I think most people are generally quite affable, really. I mean, the thing is, the thing about being a boater is, once you've paid your licence to the authorities, I'm not a Canal and River Trust fan at all. But,
Canal and River Trust is the organisation that runs the canals in London, or the whole
correct.
country?
Yeah, well, most of them, yeah. Most of the navigations, if they're not under Environment Agency control or a private navigation trust, the vast majority are run by the Canal and River Trust. Again, they're a result of the Condem government in the late 2000s.
Conservative Lib Dem.
Yeah, the Condem government, and prior to that, the British Waterways was a government-run institution. The canals are a really important part of our heritage that are valuable in ways that can't be quantified economically. After the crash in 2008, the Cameron government decided that they could no longer afford to subsidise or run the canals, so they turned British Waterways into, even though Canal and River Trust call themselves a charity, what they actually are is a limited company with a charitable trust status, which means they're a limited company that doesn't have to pay tax. However, the nature of any limited company is to run for profit, whereas the canals are a depreciating asset which I believe should be nationalised and held in trust for the nation. I mean, the benefits they have for everybody, not just boaters, are far too many for me to mention here. From green corridors to ecology, space for wildlife, for mental health for people living in really urban areas, beautiful green space. I mean, one of my big things for living on the canal in London is it makes it manageable for me. It's like most of the time you're in this quite quiet green corridor, which is I feel very lucky to have that. And for me, it makes metropolitan living a lot more tolerable.
I agree with that. Totally agree with that. I cycle to work, and for me, it's sometimes the best part of the day is cycling along the canal for 20 minutes because it keeps me out of town, as it were.
Yeah. In
this slightly alternative world, as you say, it's a narrow sort of strip or ribbon. There's a boat that's just gone past us. It's a lovely sunny evening here. It's 7:30. They're making a move. Is this part of the thing that the Canal and Rivers Trust does, which is you have to move every 2 weeks?
Yeah, and it's something that's enforced in a very draconian and unfair way. So most people who live on the tow, if you're not on a private mooring, which they're the hen's teeth in London private moorings, they're very desirable and quite expensive and difficult to get hold of. You generally have a constant cruising licence, which means that your obligations on your yearly licence are that you need to move a certain distance. I think it's about 23 miles over your licensing year. You need to move every 2 weeks in one direction without going back on yourself. And the Canal and River Trust enforcement of that is very draconian, and they fail to appreciate that boats are homes. In fact, legally, they refuse to recognise that as a quango, they're in. To me, they're a quango, and as a quango, they're an unelected body that is acting in the capacity of an elected body, like they're our council. Yeah, they're supposed to provide our facilities, supposed to provide places for our rubbish, water points, etc. And on one hand, they fulfil that role really badly. In fact, there's a licensing review at the moment where that I think they quite happily do away with most constant cruisers, and their agenda is to have everybody who is a residential boater on a private mooring.
I kind of get the impression, talking to other boaters too, that your viewpoint is not unique to you. Most boaters seem to have a strong opinion about the Canal and Rivers Trust.
Well, absolutely. For me, it's actually personal. I mean, my grandfather worked for British Waterways for 40 years. He was a staunch socialist, and he was Master of Stores for British Waterways right back to when it got nationalised in 1948, and when the Waterways got nationalised under the Ministry of Transport.
So you've got a long family history to do with the waterways, to do with boats,
yeah,
and to do with canals.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my grandfather, grandmother, auntie and mother's ashes are all in Gloucester Docks, next to where my
wow.
grandfather's office was.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely a strong family connection. So yeah, the way Canal and River Trust acts and the way they enforce when they should be facilitating and coordinating is something that's very close to my heart. Yeah.
You mentioned your granny and your auntie. The boat that just went past had 2 young women on it. I was going to ask whether you've seen more women living on boats in the time that you've been on boats, but you mentioning family members from way back in the day kind of shows that it's got a long history.
Well, I mean, my grandfather worked. You know, he was a bargee as a child. You know, it's very much a working environment thing.
So by bargee you mean the people who had the horses that went along and took goods on their boats?
Yeah, not quite that far back. I think most river transport was motorised by that stage. I mean, he was a bargee on the Gloucester Sharpness Ship Canal,
which is quite a short canal, isn't it?
No, it's about 20 or 30 miles. It follows a straight route along the banks of the River Severn, which is very difficult to navigate, be it having one of the highest and strongest tidal reaches in the world.
Can you ever see yourself going back down west, ending up on those canals or in that part of the world again?
Oh, definitely, imminently. I mean, I've got I've been on cruises for years, and because cruises are wide, you're limited to a certain proportion of the network because a lot of it is narrow gauge. I'm now on a narrow boat, which because it's under 60 foot, it's what they call a go anywhere. So it means I can do pretty much the entire inland network, which is something I intend to do imminently.
Brilliant. I didn't realise that certain boats could not go in certain places. I didn't realise width or length was an issue.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were all built privately, and during the era of Canal Mania, when they were all built, they were
when was that?
When
was Canal Mania?
Canal Mania was from the late 17th century up to the Steam Age. Yeah, I mean, it was much like a modern comparison would be the dot-com bubble, where it was a massive fad where lots and lots of people invested in it, and for every success there were many failures. A lot of people, like for instance, this canal, the Hertford Union, was built by George Duckett, who also canalised the River Stort.
Where's that? Where's the River Stort?
The River Stort is far up the lee navigation.
Right, north of London.
It runs from Bishop Stortford down to Rye House and Hoddesdon in Hertfordshire. And on gauges, when George Duckett canalised that river, because the Stort Navigation Company were in competition with the Lee Conservancy, they specifically made their locks slightly too small to accommodate a Thames lighter.
That's very petty.
That the lighter men couldn't. Well, it wasn't just petty; it was economic.
So they were protecting.
Yeah.
Almost.
So they're a funny size lot. Like most of the network is either single or double gauge. So you can either get one narrowboat into a lock chamber or 2 alongside. Whereas on the Stort, they're bigger than a narrowboat, but not big enough to accommodate 2, which is quite unusual.
And then the railways came along, and everything changed. So there's a long history of canals in this country, but there's also a sort of a complex history of their usefulness and falling into disrepair. At the moment, given your family history, given your knowledge, is there any idea about what percentage of our canal system in Britain is still active, is still filled with water, is still actually part of what was? I mean, are we down to 50%? I've got no idea.
I'd say it was like due to. I mean, this is it. In post-war up until the 1960s, there was very much when everything was nationalised, and the government very much had the Ministry of Transport, as it was, very much had an agenda of seeing it as surplus to requirement and filling it all in.
So they consciously filled it in.
They had an agenda to do it, and they wanted to do it, but then groups formed in the 60s, like the Inland Waterway Association, who made a point of very much like demonstrating and doing the sort of direct action which is being criminalised in this country at the moment, in order to keep those waterways open, and seeing it, presenting it and lobbying and campaigning for the powers that be to see it as a recreational space rather than a defunct commercial space, and keeping a lot of it open for that purpose, for the benefit of the community, much in the same way as the Ramblers Association opened up the right to roam at a similar sort of time. I think without them, a lot more of it would be filled in. And a lot of it was filled in, and a lot of what was filled in, you know, the benefit of reopening it has caused a massive surge in defunct and shut down waterways being reopened at the moment.
You mentioned the fact that you're looking forward to travelling the waterways of the entire country. What's your thought on that? Is it just to be a rolling stone that gathers no moss, or will you go in a certain pattern and in a certain way?
My thoughts on it are, at the moment, a big part of Canal and River Trust income is an annual government grant. I believe it's 300 million, which is being withdrawn over the next 10 years. Without that funding, a lot of it is going to be, they're going to have to stop maintaining it because they haven't got the funding to do it. So one of my main motives is doing the whole network while that's still actually a possibility.